Welcome everyone to our Mindful Text Perspective show, where we interview leaders on the forefront of issues related to well-being at work. I'm your host for today, Holly Montalban, and I'm excited to be here today with Jennifer Moss, award-winning journalist and author of her new book titled The Burnout Epidemic, which explains how widespread and serious the issue of burnout is today, and provides research-based solutions for stress management, burnout prevention, and ultimately creating healthier, happier workplaces. So welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So first of all, I want to also say thank you for shedding light on this important topic and for putting this book out into the world and doing the work that you do. I really love how data-driven it is and based in facts and statistics, but also it's got some compelling stories in there that really hit home on this topic of burnout. So I'd love to know what drew you to this topic in the first place and what motivated you to write this book.
Well, I've been in the strategy space and working with organizations for a long time around well-being, wellness. And what I came to understand is that we were spending a lot of time trying to motivate people within organizations and thinking about it from a sort of a wellness tactic standpoint. And that's really important, even though we were way ahead of our time, even just talking about happiness in organizations. It's just sort of started to really take hold and people are seeing the importance and value of it. But what I started to realize is that there were some tools that either weren't being utilized or employers weren't modeling the behavior of well-being, or we weren't attacking the problem in the right place. And so we had a lot of people really chronically stressed that we weren't dealing with. Instead, we were just really dealing with those people that were already healthy and motivated. And we need to be able to capture everyone in an organization to really have a healthy, sustainable, workplace. And so that's what really drove me to figure out what were the upstream causes of stress, how we can mitigate them, and then, hopefully how we can prevent and fix burnout.
Fantastic. And so when is it time to invest in preventing burnout? If you're at an organization, how do you know, what are some signs that your organization should really invest in the prevention of burnout?
Well, I think we've already hit that place where there's no way that we can't at this point. When we're looking at 41% of the global workforce looking at leaving their job in the next 3 months and leaving their career entirely. And when you look at that data, only 4% of people are saying they're leaving because of pay, that a lot of it has to do with workplace stress, that we are at an inflection point where the idea of looking for signs and then responding to them, we're far past that. It has to be that there's an urgency and that we should be embedding well-being, strategies, making sure wellness is part of our overall, part of our KPIs. It has to be embedded and institutionalized inside of our organizations because that's really critical. But if you are, still very early on or new to this situation and you want to figure out what I should be looking for, we really want to look at those 3 big signs that show that your workplace isn't considering burnout prevention in the way that they should be. And those 3 signs of chronic stress and burnout are really just exhaustion. How tired are people? Are you hearing people talk about how exhausted they are all the time? Have you seen less engagement? Are people feeling sort of distance emotionally from their job? They're not feeling as effective. They don't feel as much purpose in what they're doing. And then how much negativism are you seeing? That cynicism where people are feeling hopeless or they feel like they don't have sort of control of the controllables, even that this is sort of going to be like this for forever. That kind of fatalist talk where you're picking that up as those signs in your organization. All 3 of those together are really demonstrating that you're at risk of burning out and losing a lot of your people in your organization.
Right. So firstly, organizations shouldn't really be waiting until all those signs become really clear, right? It should become embedded into their culture as
Mhm.
as much towards the beginning as possible. And the connection between cynicism and burnout is, I find that really fascinating. And so maybe you can expand on that a little bit more. And how would you pick up on something like that? I mean, if you're the CEO or if you're in HR, how do you get a sense of, yeah, cynicism is really on the rise, and that's something we should be paying attention to?
I really strongly recommend, and I wrote a lot about this in my previous book, but this is a big part of the strategy that I work on is, data-based insights. And we can be asking questions of people, really things like ENPS and NPS scores, that kind of data, even just in the current stuff that we're measuring right now, give us a good signal of whether people would recommend this as a place to work or not, or be advocating to a client or customer that they're getting really good, healthy customer satisfaction. Those types of measures that were already in place, we can map that historically to seeing ebbs and flows in our organization. But then we also should be looking at just doing a measure around burnout and seeing, what are people feeling? How are they feeling? And asking predictive questions like, how do you think you're going to feel in 3 months from now? You can see if someone's predicting that it's not going to get better, or if you can see them, believing there's a light at the end of the tunnel. That question really differentiates whether, people are feeling hopeful or they're feeling hopeless. You can also decode whether you're going to see a lot of people leaving your company, and that's really what we need to get into, is looking sort of reading between the lines based on maybe existing data that we have or incorporating new data so that we can then make decisions. And I do think it's really important for direct managers to be asking more just how people are feeling. They should be having non-work related check-ins every single week that allow those managers to be able to figure out what are the words that I should be listening for. If my employees are constantly saying I'm tired, or oh, I just feel like this is just never going to end, those types of, that kind of language, that narrative that you keep hearing in certain employees, you have to predict that means that they're not doing well. And that's where you have to make sure that you're providing the kind of tools and support that those employees need, so that then they feel like they can, that they're cared for and that you care about them, and that there's something there that's going to give them the capacity to heal. Without that, then people feel really abandoned, and then employees leave.
Interesting, because I feel like there's probably been a shift over time where a while ago it would have felt like the way that you deal with emotions and stress, that's kind of outside of work. That's like outside of what I, as an employer, should be asking you about or prying into. And I feel like now things have shifted where there's more of an understanding that how you deal with these things and how you're doing emotionally is actually quite critical to how you're performing at work. And so on one hand, it might have felt like overstepping into a more personal area to be asking employees those types of questions. But on the other hand, it is really important. And I think that people do value it, feeling like, okay, on a human level, that my employer does actually care about how I'm doing as a person. But that's an interesting kind of line to walk, where it's like you want to help people. You don't really want to overstep too much into a personal area. But it is important to understand now. So, I mean, would you agree that that has probably changed over time, and that now people are more open to talking about that kind of stuff at work?
Absolutely. One of the key things that I try to continue to mention is that it isn't entirely hopeless what we've gone through within the pandemic. There's obviously a lot that we can learn from it. And one of the things that has happened is that the pendulum has swung really far in one direction, where all of us collectively at the exact same time, which you can't imagine in any part of history, unless it's a world war, where we've gone through something at such a collective level and gone through this kind of grief and pain. And we faced our own mortality. There's been a lot of shift and change that we've gone through together. And, you know, in some cases, yes, we talk a lot about the polarization that's created, but in a lot of cases, it's actually created this equity and this sort of amongst a lot of, you know, leaders and their teams, in that they're sharing the experience, so they become more vulnerable. They can empathize differently. It isn't like change in the past where, you know, we're just automating a whole bunch of, you know, people in the organization, or, you know, we've moved to adopting a different type of technology, and that means we're making a certain group obsolete, and those people at the senior leadership aren't experiencing it in the same way that a specific group is feeling it. We're all going through this. You know, there's parents that have had to be homeschooling their kids in the middle of trying to do a PowerPoint, and they're, you know, they have no, you know, they have jogging pants on because they couldn't get enough time to get showered, the dog's barking. We're all going through these things that everyone understands. And so there's something that's changed, and that's made us able to talk about something that we all can understand. And so then I think there's a silver lining in that there's a destigmatizing of these conversations. There's more openness and willingness to talk about it. And then also it's become a bottom line issue. So there's no way that organizations can ignore it, because they're going to lose their workforce because of it. So there's, you know, real human-centered reasons why we have to do this as leaders. And then there's bottom line reasons that we have to do this as leaders, is really make mental health conversations much more open, and continue to do that in the future of work.
Right. Yeah. It's that sense, you know, like you were saying, the pandemic has brought that sense of we're all in this together, even though we were before. I mean, we're all humans trying to figure out this world together, but that makes it a little bit more at the forefront of everybody's mind. So that's a great point. And so that brings me to my next question, which is, you know, in your book, you make a really interesting distinction between self-knowledge and self-awareness. And I don't think I've heard anybody talk about those two concepts in that way before. Can you explain that? Like, what is the difference between self-knowledge and self-awareness, and why does that matter?
You know, I talk about personalities at risk of burnout too. We see people that have high levels of perfectionism, high levels of neuroticism as being more prone to burnout, right? But having self-knowledge is, you know, knowing kind of who you are in a sense of like what you do as a function, or, you know, how you perform, or it's much more tactical and practical than self-awareness, which is you understand that you don't need to interpret how people describe you in a way that is through your own interpretation. And self-awareness means like, I know who I am, and I also can potentially filter that other people, and the way they look at me and they're aware of who I am, is through a lens of much more compassion, much more kindness, much more empathy than I give myself credit for. A lot of people that have high levels of perfectionist concerns, which is the difference between perfectionist, you know, strivings, healthy feeling where we're, you know, trying to hit goals, we have high ambitions, we want to achieve these goals. You know, in the pandemic, we felt a lot of stress around hitting those goals and not being able to, just because, you know, we're going through this chronic stress, which is a massive impact on our, you know, brain state and our capacity and our ability to be, you know, high achieving. And so what happens is we start to interpret, you know, we start to interpret those as failings. We start to think that we are not good enough in our jobs, or we're not capable, or we shouldn't be in these jobs. We have all or nothing statements. You know, I just should quit because I'm terrible at being a nurse, or you also can't have constructive feedback because you internalize it differently. And that self-knowledge versus self-awareness plays a role there, because when you have self-awareness, you don't catastrophize your own moments where you don't hit those goals. you have self-compassion, and you recognize that we should be putting a disclaimer on everything in our world right now by saying, yeah, this is really great. I did a really great job in a pandemic, like ... in a pandemic. And we need to add that. And self-knowledge is more that we can then interpret that if there is critical feedback, or there are, feelings of where we haven't met those goals, that it isn't an all or nothing statement. So there's a very, interesting distinction between the two things, but one is just being able to have self forgiveness and being able to get through this, I think, and survive and thrive. Whereas the other really doesn't help you to have longevity and sustain in a time of chaos and crisis.
Right. So if you have that powerful combination of self-knowledge and self-awareness, I mean, that's going to actually, no matter what your situation is, it's going to help you prevent getting to the point of burnout, because you won't get so overwhelmed by, okay, I'm struggling in this situation or that. And that, yeah, that's a great combination of self-knowledge and self-awareness. So definitely going to keep that one in mind for sure. And I think that is even more important now that our whole working situation has changed, with so many people being remote workers now. And so I know that with remote work, before it all happened, I think a lot of us always thought, oh man, like I would be so much less stressed out if I could just work from home all the time. And then, the pandemic happened, and then you have no choice but to work from home all the time. And a lot of people found either that is really stressful in itself because the environment is not very conducive to working, or just that it's very easy to get up, go straight to your computer, work the entire day, go back to bed, repeat and do the whole thing again. And having to separate home life from work life and actually rip yourself away from the computer is a challenge for a lot of people. And so I think that for some, the benefits of working from home became clear, and for others, it probably added to them moving towards burnout. So how can we make remote work more sustainable without burnout?
Well, I've been writing about this, topic of burnout for a while, but I've been really focused on virtual employees long before the pandemic started. And it was already that there was a risk of burnout, and it was higher for those working remotely for a variety of reasons. And one of them being loneliness and isolation, one of them being that they aren't getting the same sort of visibility within their organizations from their bosses. There were, if there was some in the office and some working remote, there was a bias to people being in the office and being seen, and they would be more likely to get promoted. So there were these issues already that were existing. Plus, some people, because it was so rare to get that flexibility to work from home, there was an indebted servitude, to the organization and to your manager to be so happy that you got some flexibility. So here we are. And what really kind of ticks me off is this, idea that working from home in the pandemic is like working from home. It's nothing like my experience working from home pre-pandemic. I mean, I had all the kids in school. I had, protected space. I wasn't writing a book on burnout in my bedroom because that was the only safe place that I could, find. And I still basically, I had to put signs up on my door that says, unless you're bleeding, don't knock. I mean, it was like, this was what was happening. So this idea that, that we're working from home, this isn't really what it's like. Working from home should be that you have a separate space, that you have quiet, that you have downtime, that you're getting, flow, that you are able to not, worry about all of the other unpaid labor duties that a lot of women in particular had to deal with this year, where they're looking at the kitchen that needs to be, dealt with, and all of the other stuff that they're dealing with. Women added 15 to 20 hours of unpaid labor in the pandemic. So that wasn't how it was before. It's astronomical, the difference between, and the delta between what is working from home now and what it was like then. So what's had to happen is we've had to work 30% more each day to hit those same pre-COVID goals, because we're dealing with distraction, we're dealing with chronic stress that actually leaves us. And you know this from the mindfulness piece, is that, you know, the back of our brain, our limbic system is being so triggered. The surge capacity is just constantly being, you know, being asked of us, and no one can sustain that. So we're getting brain fog, and we're not, you know, able to moderate conversations. We're more volatile, more irritable. We're having a harder time making decisions. So that all adds to workload. So this idea that working remote, what we need to be thinking about the future of working remote is taking away a lot of those distractions. We need to create a lot of support in helping people to digitally detox and creating ways for people to be able to have places of flow where they're able to get quiet space, where it's protected, you know, where we're making sure that we have childcare policies that support those women that are exiting the workplace because they have to deal with this care issue. You know, a lot of things have to change for us to really tackle the virtual experience and make it so that it's more like how it was pre-pandemic. And then we also have to deal with the loneliness piece, because people are so isolated. How do we still get people to be in person, sharing mirror neurons, connecting, being part of a tribe, having friendships? I mean, all of that still matters, and we're not doing a good job of that in this virtual, you know, fully remote environment either. So a lot has to shift. There's no one answer for that, but it's about small changes that still have to occur, and not continuing to do what we're doing in this emergency and just continuing to be like we're acting like we're an emergency. This is endemic for now. Let's try to figure out how to make it sustainable.
Absolutely. And I think that what's interesting is that it's got to be a combination of things that you as an individual take initiative to do, and you as an organization take initiative to put in place to support your employees. Like you're saying, childcare policies, you know, setting times for perhaps your team to have digital detox. And like we were talking about before, having some time over the holidays where everybody has really shut down so that everybody can recharge. But then on a personal level too, I remember in your book that one of my favorite concepts that you talked about was this fake commute, right? So when we went from having to drive into the office to then working from home, it took away that commute, which I think a lot of people were really happy about. I would definitely be one of those. But then it was interesting because that time that you used to use commuting then just went straight into working time. And I'm totally guilty of that. I mean, I just would get up and then I would go straight over. My commute would be walking 10 steps over to my desk and starting to work. And so I loved that you talked about this idea of a fake commute. Can you explain that for us just briefly?
I love this concept. And when I heard about it, I thought that is exactly what we need to be doing, because immediately within a couple of weeks, the average workday had increased by 48 minutes. And when you look at the average commute, this is not like the horrible commutes that are 2 hours there, 2 hours back, but the average commute is, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. So it makes sense that that was just replaced with a half hour on each end where we just started work. And so instead of adding that, now actually I have to say we've added 3 hours work day. So we are really filling up that time, which is not healthy. But even just that desire to sort of lean over, and I have to be really protective of my digital addiction too, because I just lean over and grab my phone and I start scrolling and like, there I am, I've already started working. And no wonder I'm so exhausted when the last thing I do too at the end of the day is, look at my phone. And so I've been really trying to, and a lot of others have replace their morning commute with this sort of walk that they take around the neighborhood. They go, around. Some people, I mean, I know we're digitally detoxing, but sometimes it's great to listen to some awesome music. It works within our brain in a different way than us looking, at our phones, et cetera, but listening to some really upbeat music or, something creative and interesting, like a podcast, or, just do epistemic curiosity practice, which is seeking information just for art and science and fun and, for our own self-interest and not because of work or for any purpose to it, or just look up around you and walk around and see, the world happening around you. And you do that for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. The whole goal, though, is you have to get up, get ready for work. So showers, the stat is showers are down by 30% in 2020 and 2021. So we're not showering anymore. And changing our clothes has gone down by 18%. So we are having these weird, like, freakonomics situations happening here because we're just not caring. And hygiene and conscientiousness are actually really good for preventing burnout. So, get up, get showered, go for a nice walk, come back and start your day, flip on your laptop, and do not look at your phone until you do that, or, or flip on your laptop. And then here's the cool thing, because the way that our brain works, when we know we have routine, it starts to prime itself before certain times. It fills us with different types of chemistry. It could be anxiety producing chemistry, or hormones, or it could be, relaxing hormones or, bonding hormones. So if we know that every single day at a certain point, we're going to start our commute back home, like we would if we were in the office, most of us would sort of start packing up. And when you start packing up at the end of your day at the office, you start to feel like, okay, the day's over, and you feel this excitement, like you're getting home, you're going to rest. The same thing happens when you prime yourself with that fake commute, where you get up, you actually put on like your comfy clothes and you go for a walk and you wind down, you come back, you've already shut your laptop down, but you come back, your body starts to prime itself with every single part of that routine, putting on your, your clothes, your comfy clothes, you're going for a nice calming walk, and you're coming back into your home without looking at your computer. It's all of these little tiny primes, these processes that then get us to feel more relaxed, and we can bifurcate then between, our office at home and our work, and then our home life as well.
I love that. And I think one of the things that when you get very caught up in wanting to be as productive as possible is that you think, man, well, going for a 20-minute walk, I could get, 20 emails done instead. But it is really something that you can see a big difference in very easily when I can say from experience, like if I get up and I just go straight to the computer and then I work the whole day and I haven't gone for a walk or done anything, you definitely feel more exhausted. Your brain is just, you're not processing things by the end of the day as fast and as well and with more, calmness as you would before. And then if you just take that 20 minutes and go for that walk, you come back feeling refreshed and you're ready to take on another challenge at work and whatever it is that you need to do. So it's interesting because the first instinct is, well, going for a walk doesn't feel productive. But actually, when you start to do it, you notice, wow, I am more productive now that I've done this. So it's super effective. And I can't say that I'm going to commit to putting on work pants every day. I might still end up in my comfy pants, but hey, at the top, I'm open to that.
That's exactly it. That's what I say. Like, don't worry so much. Sometimes it's just even changing out your like, people are saying that they're like wearing their sweats sort of to sleep so that they don't have to actually change out of their pajamas. They're just in their sweats. And I've been saying, at least like change your clothes, just even like create a prime to change your clothes. And I get it. There's going to be days where it's like, you know what, I have a down day. I'm not going to be in front of my camera. This is the best part about the flexibility piece, is it does allow me to regroup, and that's okay. But I think that it's just about like a little bit more routine, because we've really gone in the other direction where there's very little. And I also do think that, like we have other things in our lives. If you look at your lifespan and all the things that matter, work is an important part. We spend a lot of time there. But, I think about myself, and at the end of the day, when I do take that time, that walk, and, I fall off the wagon. I'm not perfect, and it's not every day. Sometimes I get embedded into something that I'm just really excited about and I don't come up for air. But when I don't do that, I notice that I'm not the same mom. I'm not the same wife. I'm not the same person in the evenings. I'm sort of just really tired. I'm not engaged. All I want to do is, sit and like tune out and escape. And so I'm not engaging in my life either. And I find if I have that walk or I do something for my own, self-care, that I do come back and have a more vibrant relationship with the people that matter to me. And over your life, like that's the most important thing, really. Like that amount of time that you're spending those hours with the people you love, that's the deathbed regret that you would have if you don't, focus more on what really matters in life.
Right. It's that concept of, are you working to live or are you living to work? I think you want to be finding a way to do a bit of both and combine it. And hopefully you love your work and that you feel alive doing that too. But you're right. It's very easy to get very tunnel vision and get very caught up in just the work aspect and lose sight of some of those other things that can help you feel good generally and will ultimately help contribute to you being more successful in your career at the end of the day. So with all of these awesome ideas of how a person or an organization can prevent burnout, are there any examples you can provide? And it doesn't need to be specific company names, but just examples or a case study of an organization that has had some success in preventing this issue of burnout.
The ones that I did a lot of research for the book are companies that have been embedding a lot of these well-being strategies, but thinking about it not just as a well-being strategy where it's sort of perks, it's also burnout prevention. So they were really looking at sort of the whole overall root causes that lead to burnout, and also, helping to motivate and being able to be very individualized about how everyone gets care. And Hewlett Packard is a great example of that. Cisco's and IBM, they've been working on this for a lot of years up to the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, they had really strong trust from their employees. They didn't have as much attrition. Their employee experience scores were still really high. And some of those, tactics and strategies were, again, it was big strategy. Like at Hewlett Packard, they made sure that there was equity in their maternity and paternity leave. So family planning was something that everyone is supposed to be engaged in. And so this disproportionate impact on women feeling like they have to be the only ones caring for children, that societally leads to what we experienced this year with women leaving the workforce. So they've been driving this thinking for a long time. They also made work continue to be fun. I mean, when everyone went remote, a lot of what happened is social collaboration platforms became all about work and collaboration and looping, instead of it being like, where you have gifts that are hilarious and you have your whole, you have a lot of fun on there and you talk about quilting and axe throwing or favorite movies or whatever you're going to do. It sort of became that it was like an environment that was all about coping and surviving. And then there was some, tactics that I saw organizations do that didn't work, where it was like, let's do yoga in the afternoon with all staff. And I know a lot of what I heard in the research for the book was, I don't want to be necessarily doing that with my boss, sweating in front of my boss, but I do want to have support for my own well-being that I can take care of on my own time. It's really understanding what the nuances of your organization, the type of team you have, the type of individual that tends to be, part of your workforce. It's very different working with the marketing team. Most often the personality persona of a marketing team is very different than software developers, so understanding what a role of even physicians and lawyers versus those working in HR, different openness to different types of tactics and strategies. that is what is so critical, is that what I saw, the best type of organizations doing the best jobs were the ones that just were so agile. They over communicated all the time. They actively listened, and they got information back and learned about what people were feeling and what was bothering them and what they felt like they needed. And then they would action it. Like, it was always week to week, learn, sort of assimilate, action, learn, assimilate, action. When things stopped working because something changed in the pandemic that changed everything up, it was like, okay, let's relearn again. There was no marriage to a specific way of behaving. And I think that was when leaders could figure that out, and the ones that I saw really doing a great job of that, they're not dealing with the same level of attrition as other organizations are right now. And I think that's what we see is this legacy of, this is how we have to be. CEOs saying, oh, come back to work 5 days a week. I don't really care where you live. Come back to the city and just start working 5 days a week. We can't behave like that, because you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. We've changed, we're different. So it's about realizing, okay, we're in paradigm shifting time. We're in full disruption. So how am I going to take this and try to be agile, try not to be married to the way it was before for centuries even. It's go time now in the future of work. It's sort of been moved up really quite rapidly into the now. So what are we going to do about it? And the ones that responded quickly are doing way better than others.
Right. And there are so many different tools out there now that companies can utilize to help bring more wellness into the workplace, bring more fun into the workplace, all of that. And so I'd love to hear, what do you see as the role of wellness technology in helping to address and solve this issue?
What's so fascinating is that technology plays this really interesting role. And when we use it for good, because technology, by itself is like kind of neutral. It's just what we do with it, that and how it's developed and what its purpose is that makes it either not healthy for us or healthy for us, right? So what I'm seeing is that we're, in our organizations, there's things that are creating us, or increasing our burnout. And that is just the amount of time we're on Zoom, or the amount of collaboration, or the amount of time we're checking into work. We need to be able to find technology and use it for the right purposes, which means we need to make sure well-being isn't workload, that we give our employees enough time to utilize the wellness technology that we're offering them. If you're working someone 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and then say, well, use this, technology to then make yourself feel better. Well, that isn't going to help. You need to reduce workload so that those things are actually useful, that they're valuable. And I do see that this last year, the amount of adoption of technology, specifically in the wellness space, is going to be, it's going to prove out to be very beneficial, because now we're using more teletherapy, which is excellent. We're, more telehealth, excellent. We're using technology in a way that gets us away from our devices, but uses our devices to make us, increase our mindfulness and make us more connected to ourselves. And as long as we have organizations that support the time for that, and then provide them the tools to be able to leverage that for their own self-care, then we've got a winning combination. I think that's where we need to get to, where we have both in play. But the adoption piece is what's so exciting to me, because we were forced into using technology for our own well-being. And that, I think, is going to make it so that there's a lot of easier access to tools that will help us improve our health in the future, and will be part of, be codified inside of organizations from now until forever.
I love it. And so we're nearing the end of our time here, and I want to ask, what is the biggest takeaway that you would really want our audience to walk away with after hearing this conversation today?
I want people to know that burnout is not their fault, that there should be no shame in burning out, that burnout happens for a variety of reasons, an ecosystem that is not functioning, or a byproduct of a global pandemic that is just adding so much stress on our lives that it's unsustainable. And that there's a lot of things that we can't control, that we can control the controllables, and that's a way to give ourselves some sense of agency, and that improves our feeling like we can solve for some of it, but we can't solve for all of it. There's a whole bunch of things that have to come into play before that we can really work on healing burnout, which comes with depression and anxiety and fatigue and a lack of self-efficacy and a lack of confidence. And all of that makes us feel like we're not good at what we're doing. And just remember, you are really good at what you're doing. We should be patting ourselves on the back for getting this far. We didn't fall into total anarchy like, in the movie Contagion. We actually, have done quite well, and we should be proud of ourselves and remind ourselves of that all the time. And that if you are feeling extreme levels of cynicism and negativism and exhaustion and really disengaged from your job, that there could be a point where you need to talk to someone and get some support. Burnout is a very serious issue with catastrophic consequences if we don't deal with them. So don't be afraid to say, I really need to tackle this right now and get some support and get some help, because that's the first next best step forward. And it could save you from some pretty serious events. So please do that. Please get help.
Couldn't agree more. And so where can people find you and your new book, The Burnout Epidemic?
They can go to my website, jennifer-moss.com, but I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and I love people coming to ask me questions there. I'm interactive, just have to follow me, like we can actually converse there. It's Jen, and it's Leigh, Jen Lee Moss. So you can find me on LinkedIn and ask questions, and we can talk about whatever your burning questions are about burnout.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great conversation. I could go on for hours, but we unfortunately have to cut it off here. So this has been great. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. Really appreciate it. And just glad that there are more tools coming out there, more content out there to help bring awareness to this issue. And we look forward to continuing to track your work and see how things go in the future. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you.